Let's talk.
Giles Brown.
Adrian Newey, an illustrated biography of F1's greatest designer, is a fabulous new book by Frank Hopkinson. We've had Frank on the show before because he had this amazing tome called Formula One Circuits Then and Now, which my father received that for his birthday, and he's obviously, as you know, he's an ex-pilot himself, and he was very, very chuffed indeed. I'm sure he'd be chuffed to receive this one. Delighted to say that Frank joins me live on the line now. Frank, good morning to you, sir.
Good morning, Giles.
Great to have you on. You've gone sort of like from looking backwards into the past, like then and now, to, well, I mean, easily perhaps the greatest F1. I mean, Gordon Murray's fans will be throwing their brabhams at the wireless, but you could argue that that Adrian Newey has had more of an effect and influence on F1 than anybody before and probably since and after, I'd imagine.
Well, if you want to compare stats, Gordon Murray has won 10 world titles.
Right.
And Adrian's won 26.
Okay. So
yeah, it's. I did a little chart, a grid of the influence that people have had over, and compare people like Patrick Head, who was the boss of Williams, the designer of Williams, and even Enzo Ferrari. And Adrian Newey's got 26.
Right.
Enzo Ferrari is next up with 17. And then it's Patrick Head on 16, Frank Williams the same.
Yeah.
Ross Brawn on 16, Toto Wolff on 15, Christian Horner on 14, Rory Byrne on 12. Gordon Murray's back in 10.
Wow.
So,
and
that comparison.
Harvey Postlethwaite, anywhere near there at all?
No, but Harvey Postlethwaite would probably be about 6.
Right.
He was always there. I mean, he was Adrian's mentor to start off with. He was the guy that gave Adrian Newey a job in the first place when he was working for Fittipaldi.
Oh, now you see. So, I mean, again, ladies and gentlemen, if you're not petrolheads at that point, that last 2 minutes of conversation meant absolutely nothing to you. But everyone's going, yes, they mentioned Fittipaldi and Postlethwaite and Gordon Murray. Let's start with then Adrian, because he has, as we said before, he is a titan. He is an icon in the world of F1. Where does he originally sort of start off with then?
Well, he did ever since he was a child. His father was a vet who liked to tinker with cars, and his father built about 3 different Lotus Elans in kit form. And Adrian would help him on the engineering front, building all the struts and the suspensions. And he used to make Tamiya 1 in 12 models as well. So he got the Lotus 49B as which is a very famous car in the 1960s.
Yep.
Graham Hill sort of made it the most famous, perhaps. And he would construct it. And very handily, Tamiya used to name the parts. So he would put the parts together. So he would know what a suspension rod, a track rod was, and the steering wheel devices. And he got so into it. And he was absolutely determined to have a career in Formula One. But there was no route in then. So he took an aeronautical degree at Southampton University. And had he not had a career in Formula One, he was going to do a PhD on helicopter rotor blades.
Yeah.
But instead, he wrote to Harvey Postlethwaite, and Harvey Postlethwaite said, "Come along for an interview."
So, I mean, a couple of points off that one. Those Tamiya models were really well detailed. But when you used to pick up a car magazine back in the day, kit cars were a big thing. Everybody was trying to build their own AC Cobra based on a Ford Escort chassis or something like that. Because it was the cheap.
I had a Dutton.
You had a Dutton. There you go.
With a Capri engine, 2.8 litre Capri engine. You dropped the clutch on that and it went sideways.
But you see, here's the thing. I mean, Enzo Ferrari famously described all the great engineers in the UK as garagistas, isn't he? But in the 60s, the 50s, 60s, and 70s, this was the breeding ground for a whole generation of engineers, mechanics, people who could become the bedrock of motorsport, and they all started in, Tyrrell started in the famous hut that's been moved to Goodwood these days.
Yeah, woodshed.
Yeah, exactly. So that is a really important bedrock of motor racing or in general. But in particular, it's interesting because he bridges that gap, doesn't he? Because you say aeronautical, and that is something that will become more important. So he's working because the Lotus 49 has the struts, isn't it? It has some of the first wings put on, which famously failed at Barcelona in '69. So therefore, he is, if you like, bridging the gap between making the car go sideways when you drop the clutch, and then and then the dark arts of the wind tunnel and the Venturi, etc.
Yeah. Well, ironically, Adrian actually bought a Lotus 49B, so he's sort of got the full size one now. But yeah, he joined Formula One just as they were having the ground effect cars, and these were cars that had like a hollowed out floor and skirts that helped suck cars to the road, and so they would go round corners like they were on rails. And they were banned in the early 80s, but he had experience of it. So when Venturi floors came back in 2022, the reason his most recent success has been so phenomenal is that he has bridged the gap between the early 80s and 2022, because he was the only engineer on the grid with experience of working with Venturi effect. He once did a famous test with Keke Rosberg, who drove for Fittipaldi for 1 year.
Right.
And he said the car was bouncing so much that you could actually see air underneath the tyres as it bounced down the straight. And the whole success of Red Bull and Max Verstappen's recent titles has been that he was able to combat that. He knew he had the keys to the castle in a way, in that he could diagnose the problems. And so, yeah, you're right. He bridged the gap. He has bridged the gap between so many different eras of Formula One.
And also, you mentioned, he mentioned Harvey Postlethwaite. Now, for those of us of a certain generation who grew up as small boys in the 70s, Harvey Postlethwaite is Hesketh, basically, and and the good Lord himself, and James and the team, and that and it was again that's his intro, and what an intro to get, because that was a small team taking on the big boys with a champagne last, only for a couple, because it was never going to last, only for a couple of seasons. But was it Hesketh famous said, well, I looked at the finances and realised that we were pootling on at the back of the grid in Formula 2, but for a couple of more 100,000 more, we could be pootling around the back of the grid at F1, and off they went, having a bloody lovely time. Yeah,
that's right. And I mean, Harvey Postlethwaite was a character. He, when Adrian went for the interview, he was a big biker. He arrived on his Ducati 900.
Ooh.
And I think Harvey Postlethwaite had a Moto Guzzi 900, and he said, "Can I have a go?" So Adrian lent, you can't say to the person you're trying to get a job off, "Oh no, you can't ride my motorbike."
Yeah.
So they talked for the first half an hour about motorbikes. So yes, it was a different time entirely.
And though people might think, because all you ever see is this sort of, and listen, all the best heads are bald. Trust me on this one. But all you see is this bald-headed guy, on a pit wall, looking very sort of technical. But Adrian, you mentioned the bike. I've seen Adrian Newey in his GT40. I mean, he likes a race, so he's not one of these guys who sits there going, "Oh, the differential is like this, and if we do 3% here, we can get 0.5 drag." He actually likes the nuts and bolts. I mean, he famously destroyed the the GT40 at Le Mans Classic, didn't he, a couple of years ago?
Yeah, I don't think it was his fault. He had somebody go off in front of him.
Yeah.
On that accident. I read about that accident. And yeah, he does go very close to the edge. At Goodwood, he's had a big accident at Goodwood and ended up in Christchurch Hospital in a bed next to Dario Franchitti, who also had a big accident.
Yeah.
Yeah, where if you watch him on track, he doesn't hold back. But I think there was some kind of failure in the GT40. They got the car back, and it was something to do with the braking rather than him being very wayward on track.
I saw him there's a private racetrack called Ascari up on the Ronda Road, which is about an hour from where we are, and they were having a meeting there for members, and there was nobody else around, sort of thing. So he wasn't backwards and coming forward, shall we say? And to see a GT40 at full chat and with no advertising, you can almost imagine yourself being, I don't know, someone like Ruin or Spa in the 60s. Absolutely wonderful stuff. So he's with Postlethwaite. What's its progression to? Because a lot of people just think, okay, Adrian Newey, it's Red Bull, it's Max, it's the evil empire and Star Wars.
Well, Fittipaldi ran out of sponsorship, and he lost a job. He moved to March Cars, so he did a lot of American sports. First, he did American sports cars,
right?
Then he did American Indy cars with Bobby Rahal,
right?
And he helped redesign the Indy 500 winning March.
Yeah.
Then he came back to Leighton House March.
Ooh,
which,
beautiful cars.
Which was the sort of late 80s, 87, 88, 89.
Yeah.
And they had no money as well, but slightly more than Fittipaldi did when they went bust. And basically, he designed a car that all the other the March that Ivan Capelli and Maurizio Gugelmin drove, it's like the 89C or something, was very well copied in the pit lane. And basically, Frank Williams and Patrick Head saw what a slippery car that was with just a very poor engine, and thought we could offer him a job. And basically, Leighton House were losing money. There was the Japanese asset bubble that burst in the late 80s, and so he was out of a job, and so Patrick Head offered him a job. So he went to Williams, and then from Williams to McLaren to Red Bull.
If people are wondering what the Leighton House looks like, I mean, I just it's a beautiful car, but there is one of the most iconic pictures of the 80s. I'm not sure it's what he likes, but it's Maurizio Gugelmin at Paul Ricard, the French Grand Prix, and there is an almighty crash at the start, and Maurizio, the famous picture is side on. He's upside down, and in a world where we have halos, I mean, Maurizio seems to be sort of like basically he could read the paper and do his knitting. He's got that much space in the car, but he's absolutely inverted. Luckily, the racing gods are smiling that day because nobody gets seriously hurt, but a beautiful car. And then he gets spotted by Williams. And Williams, now they're sort of midfield. But, I mean, those of us who grew up with Red 5 and all that, I mean, Williams and Patrick Head, I mean, they're just a Leviathan, aren't they?
But what Adrian likes to work for is somebody whose name is above the door. He doesn't like to work for sort of conglomerates, like a business. So March had turned into a bit of a business, whereas Frank and Patrick made all the decisions, so he could answer to them, and that was it. And when he joined McLaren, it was the same with Ron Dennis. He could answer to Ron, that was it. So, he was very happy with Patrick. Patrick Head said he would employ him as an aerodynamicist, but then he realized that actually he could do so much more because he had engineering experience from being a race engineer of his time at March in America. He could do so much more and design the car. So they designed the cars together. And
of course, how much of this is actually done on computer and in wind tunnel, and how much is it going back to model making again by making the ultimate model cars, i.e. the stuff they're going to put in a wind tunnel like 1/10 or 1/50, half scale?
Well, none then.
Right.
I mean, it was CAD only came in about 1994.
Right.
The Simtech that crashed with Roland Ratzenberger, people used to take the mickey out of Simtech because they didn't do the proper design. They used CAD.
Right.
But that was the future in 94. So back in the late 80s, early 90s, it was all drawing boards and models and 1/25th scale models in the wind tunnel.
So you mean that we're talking about so the McLarens and the Williams with the active suspension or whatever? They're not wind tunnel. I always assumed that they
were wind tunnel.
Sorry, they're not computer. I almost assumed because they had technology of having driver aids, etc. That they'd been designed on computer.
Adrian didn't design.
Right.
That he designed from a drawing board and models, and they used to go into the wind tunnel and stick bits of wool, strands of wool, on the outside of the car to see how the air would flow.
Yeah.
And even now he still uses his design board to draw, and somebody then computes, makes them into computational models.
Patrick Head, Frank Williams, Ron Dennis. Should we say they're focused individuals? Not a lot of laughs, especially Ron. Cuddly Uncle Ron.
No.
So how does he fit into working with them? Because there are a lot of sort of they're focused, aren't they, Frank? I think we could say.
Well, Adrian described Patrick Head and Frank Williams as it was Frank and Patrick's club, and they made all the decisions. And as he gradually got his sort of foot in the door, he wanted to be sort of let in on the decisions, especially drivers. So the reason he ultimately fell out with Frank Williams was that they sacked Damon Hill and hired Heinz-Harald Frentzen.
Yeah.
He had asked to be consulted about the hiring of Jacques Villeneuve, and he found out in a plane trip when he was sitting next to Patrick on a plane going back from testing, that they had hired Villeneuve and they had an agreement that both Frank and Patrick would consult him. So it wasn't necessarily a clash of personalities. It was just he wanted to be acknowledged as part of the decision-making process, and ultimately that's the reason he fell out both with Williams and McLaren.
I can imagine that the technical feedback you got from Damon Hill would be quite good as a designer, whereas the feedback you get from Jacques Villeneuve would be more, shall we say, scatterbrain approach to it, shall we say? I mean, he just go, the cat is, but Villeneuve would be like, well, the car is rubbish and I'm off to go, snowboarding or something.
Yeah, snowmobiling.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah.
I've never seen anything on record of him talking about Jacques Villeneuve's input, but he was very complimentary about Damon Hill, because Damon Hill when they had unlimited testing for Formula One. Damon Hill went off to Pembrey or in South Wales or various circuits to test the active and reactive suspension on the Williams. So it was Damon who developed that system that he ultimately drove, but he wasn't sort of planned to drive. He wasn't planned to drive it. He was down as a test driver, but they did value his feedback for sure.
How one of the things about Adrian as well is the fact that he, more than anybody, he will look at a rule book and go, right, these are the rules. Now I've spotted a loophole, and he'll do that before anybody else. And we'll and this is why we see the Red Bull domination. It makes it look like he's working to another set of rules, isn't it? Basically.
Yeah, well, the Venturi tunnels of the new the 2022 to 2025 rules. Those were very complex and unseen, and so you can't just, in the past, in the sort of 60s and 70s, you could see an innovation on a Formula One car of your rival, just copy it.
Yeah.
But in the early 2020s, you couldn't see exactly what people were doing unless the car broke down at Monaco and it was hoisted high in the air for all to see. Which is the designer's worst nightmare, to have a breakdown on the circuit, because every photographer is going to beetle out there and take photos of it. But the whole linked-in process, aerodynamics is so important on cars these days that changing one element you can't necessarily copy something and think it'll work on your car. And so Adrian's ability to marry up all the different elements is what made that Red Bull so outstanding.
Now, with Red Bull, towards the end of his tenure, we had the allegations against Christian Horner, and this was really interesting. As the camp seemed to fraction into Verstappen team, because he's got Josh the Boss, his dad. You've got the allegations that are made against Christian Horner, and Adrian, takes a very sort of moral standpoint on this one, which, again, for the cutthroat sort of, it's certainly not Flavio Briatore territory, is it?
No, it isn't. You want to get me into trouble now, don't you, Charles?
No, but what I'm saying is, again, you talk about before about him feeling he's not in part of the club with Frank and Patrick. Yeah. He's got a set of principles. The opera it perhaps. He goes beyond a little bit about going, okay, well, that doesn't kind of affect me, which is strange because, in a world where we have sort of Spygate happening, and we won't go down that one because, again, we'll lose the people who are petrol heads. But, it's an interesting decision and perhaps pushes him towards where he is now, Frank.
Well, there are two elements to it. He doesn't like it when it's uncomfortable at work, and it was uncomfortable in that situation. But just as much was the fact that Christian Horner was not necessarily belittling, but kind of not praising Adrian enough. He was trying to distribute the success of the RB19, the car that won 21 out of 22 races, as the team that did it, not Adrian. And Adrian's very competitive. Ron Dennis and Frank Williams have both described Adrian Newey as the most competitive man they have ever met.
And they work with F1 drivers.
Yes, exactly. They work with Ayrton Senna. Yeah. And so you can see that niggling at the back of Adrian's head. So it wasn't he wasn't necessarily just taking a stance against Christian Horner's wayward boss manoeuvres. To put it in a. Let's
move swiftly onwards. Aston Martin. So, Aston Martin, great name from sports cars heritage. Anybody in the 50s will know about that. And taken over by Stroll the older. Lots of money being thrown at it, lots of hype. But let's just before we get into the F1, because I want to finish on the F1 in Australia, but the Valkyrie, my God, what a car. And to see that, I mean, it's been roaring around. One of the highlights of Le Mans this year, because I will watch it, apart from Kubek's brilliant victory, it was listening to the Valkyrie. I mean, I don't care where it's finishing because it's still in development, but my goodness, the noise and the sheer presence of that car is quite something.
Yeah, and Fernando Alonso has got one. Well, he's got his own with his own adaptations. He bought it long before Adrian Newey. He knew he would be working with Adrian Newey. Alonso's always wanted to work with Adrian. Yeah, but he bought a Valkyrie because he loved it so much. But the sports car element of Adrian's career is just as important, and you can see that going on. For another 5 years or so.
You just have to look at the sort of the Bahrain buzz when the Aston Martin came out the pit lane with bits on it. Everybody it threw the rest of the pit. This is how good he is. It threw the rest of the Formula One paddock and all the social media bots into complete tizzy. They're like, what's he done now? He's found something. Oh my goodness! We're all doomed. Run to the hills. It's coming. Adrian Newey's there. Flee. Run for your lives. Throw small children and Lance Stroll behind you.
Yeah, but we've got a GP3 engine in the back. That's the only problem.
Yes.
Of the current car. The thing about Adrian is, yes, he will go to the extremes. One of the biggest regrets, I think, is that he didn't spot that double diffuser. Remember when Brawn won the championship in 2009 with the double diffuser?
Yeah.
Everybody, all the big teams thought it was illegal. And it was so difficult to put on the car that Red Bull didn't get one on until about mid-season. And so he really regretted that. So he would be totally, as you say, totally alive to finding all the loopholes in these new regulations.
So where do we go? What's your thinking about about this Grand Prix has thrown everything in the air and it's come down in different pieces. There's a lot of people, myself included, scratching their head about everybody worrying about batteries, etc., etc. I mean, I just want V10s to come back, but that's just me because I'm a fossil. But this whole from the for those of us who got up at stupid o'clock in the morning to watch Australia, which we all did, it was a bit like watching a video game with the batteries full naked, hit the button and off you go. So what are we thinking about? I mean, Aston Martin will get better. They sent them out again, even though they were, the reason they sent Alonso and Stroll was to get testing laps in, presumably, during the race.
No, absolutely, yeah. They need to test the batteries, but they didn't want to completely kill the batteries because they've found another one before, to go to China with.
Right.
So there's got 3 that they can interchange between. But I find it all really, really interesting. Melbourne is never a great race for judging the season ahead. Melbourne's a complete outlier. And in terms of energy harvesting, they always knew it was going to be a really poor Grand Prix because they would struggle to harvest energy. And even the greatest brains on the grid didn't compute the fact that both Mercedes and Verstappen would get to the grid and find they have no battery to start the race with. They can't use the battery until after they get to 50 kilometers an hour.
Right.
But when they did the kick-in of the battery was very, very low. That's why at that point the Ferraris surged past. But it was interesting to see. Before, we've got so used to everybody getting off the line together.
Yeah.
Have that variable start. It's just like the 70s.
Yeah.
And people will look at the pictures and say, oh, it wasn't like this in the 70s. But they forget that they had the slipstreaming Grand Prix in the 70s. Monza, yeah. 4 or 5 crossed the line all together.
Yep.
And that was passing and repassing, passing and repassing. A pass didn't mean anything under slipstreaming because somebody would come straight back. But that was Grand Prix heritage. And now they're doing it with batteries and people say, oh, you shouldn't be doing this. This is just yo-yoing, and you should look at it. You should give it some time. And I think after 3 races, we will have a much greater consensus of good deviations we can have to the current set of rules.
I'll tell you one thing, that's going to make Eau Rouge really interesting when we get to Spa, isn't it?
Well, just hauling up the Camel Straight, just the battery and the kind of energy you would need. You've got a big stop going into La Source hairpin, so you'll get the energy from that, and that'll take you through Eau Rouge. But it's where you go after that.
You don't want to be going through Eau Rouge up to Rascasse and then your battery go flat. That would be with with Verstappen coming up your proverbial, do you?
No, nobody wants that. Nobody wants to see that. But I don't think Spa's a problem. They're talking about Baku and Las Vegas because those have got ginormous straights.
Yeah.
Basically, the Tilke circuits, if you think Herman Tilke designed all these circuits.
Point and squirt circuits.
For overtaking with great big stops into tight corners.
Yeah. And
those actually work very well under the new rules because what you need to get the energy back is heavy braking. And with those sort of accelerate, squirt, brake, you're going to get that energy back. So the majority of the circuits this year will be all right for energy management.
It's fascinating. And of course, the other thing, of course, is what are you hoping that I could talk to you until like Thursday. So, but I've only got 2 minutes, Frank, and doesn't time fly when we're having fun? What are you hoping that people will learn and appreciate? I mean, because there's as you said before, nobody's going to come close to that record. And he is an absolute, as I said at the beginning, he's an absolute titan in the sport.
Yeah, well, it's going to be fascinating this year to see his progression from the back of the field. If it had started, say, just behind the top 4, it would have been, but it's such a story now. I mean, also, Fernando Alonso wrapped up in that story because I was thinking before I came on air, surely he will get another year because Lawrence Stroll likes his world champions in the team. And none of the really good drivers at the moment would risk their career to join Aston Martin. So Alonso must have another year. So hopefully by the end of the year, they'll be potentially nibbling at the podium places.
Yeah, and with that experience as well. And Fernando will do the hard yards to develop a car in a way that another...
It doesn't get any worse.
Yeah, indeed. The book is called Adrian Newey, an illustrated biography of F1's greatest designer. It's by Frank Hopkinson. Frank, if people want to follow you online, say nice things, or say what exactly is a Venturi again, where's the best place to find you?
You can't find me. I'm not online. I'm not on no social medias. No, I'm anonymous. I go back. I go back into my pile of autosports, hyphenate, and then write another book.
There's nothing wrong with that. Listen. It's a fabulous book. I look forward to getting my hands on my greasy little mitts on a copy because it will save me a Christmas present this year as well. My dad was delighted with the book. Thank you so much for that, Frank. The first one, but this one is called Adrian Newey. It is the illustrated biography of the world's F1's greatest designer, the world's greatest designer, Muckett, and it's by Frank Hopkinson. Once again, Frank, it's been great to talk all things Adrian with you today. Thank you so much for your time today.
Okay, cheers, Charles.